Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And the free agency period in this 2042 to 2043 offseason is now underway. Unfortunately, our Oakland Athletics are unlikely to be very active at all. We've been cut back in our budget for this upcoming season by $4 million, despite winning 120 regular season games as well as a World Series and delivering a very solid profit of close to $16 million to that miserly old miser, John Fisher. So we've done a bit in the early stages of this offseason to right-size our finances. Traded away a couple of important players, Jesus Saldana, our longtime ace, Amari Alcindor, a international amateur free agent who came up through our organization and spent the last several years with us. And we're also going to be losing Mike Gallick, who we made a qualifying offer to out of our starting rotation shortly, since he is now a free agent that we will not have the money to sign. And we're also going to be losing Galterio Mancina, the outstanding first baseman who we rented on our way to the world title this past season. That being said, certainly not all bad news for our Oakland A's. We did surprisingly re-sign Doug Weiss to continue his career in Oakland, and we've made a few trades using some of the guys that I mentioned earlier, notably Alcindor and Saldana, among others, to bring some new assets into the organization, most of the minor league variety, but one in the case of the relatively young pitcher, the second Mr. Wrangle that we've brought into our organization in recent years, Macho Wrangle, who will hopefully be our number 5 starter this upcoming offseason. And he joins another lefty, Wilson Wrangle, who has been with us the last couple of years after coming up through the Oakland A's organization. So although I don't think it's going to be an incredibly active free agent period for our Oakland A's, still optimistic that we can keep this team extremely competitive and hopefully ultimately have ourselves back in the playoffs and competing for a back-to-back World Series title, which is at this point closing in on 20 years into this playthrough. Really kind of the only thing we haven't quite achieved yet is a back-to-back title. We've won 4 out of the last 7 World Series at this point, 5 overall, and have turned our A's, despite a very small budget, into consistently one of the best teams in baseball over the last decade plus. So things going pretty well, but as I noted, have not won back-to-back World Series championships yet, so that remains a primary goal of ours. In this episode, we'll continue to monitor what's going on in free agency from afar. As I noted, the likely departures of Mr. Gallick and Mr. Mancina are going to, one, weaken our roster, but we've kind of anticipated that they would be leaving, so kind of built things in expectation that neither of those players would be back. But perhaps even more importantly, we'll certainly be taking a hit to fan interest when they leave. Hopefully we'll maintain that over 100 fan interest that we've worked so hard to get to. Gallick is well known at this point. Certainly don't think there's going to be a huge hit from his departure. We'll have to see how the game treats us with Galterio Mancina as far as his impending departure. He was not with us for a particularly long time, but is clearly an outstanding and very well accomplished major leaguer at this point, looking for a number that we can't possibly pay him, but he is extremely popular. We did get a 6-point bump to fan interest when he joined us for the stretch run this past year, so would certainly hope that any decline in fan interest from his pending departure is smaller than that. And as we're closing in on the beginning of the winter meetings, the fans are shocked we did not keep Galterio Mancina. Fans in Oakland remain very unsophisticated. I don't exactly know how they expected us to come up with 4 years and close to $100 million for a guy who's going to be 35 years old before next season, given the salary constraints that we are operating under. Fortunately, it looks like fan interest is high enough that even with some degree of degradation due to Mr. Mancina's departure, still in pretty solid shape overall in terms of our fan interest. And we've made it to the Rule 5 draft, as we typically have over the past several years. We've bolstered up our 40-man roster after paring it down a bit ahead of the beginning of the offseason. We've got 38 spots on the 40-man roster filled right now. So we've got the opportunity to bring on a player or two in the Rule 5 if it presents itself, given how strong our roster is, not necessarily anticipating that there will be anyone all that enticing to us at this point through this playthrough. Would expect that, as has been typical over the past several Rule 5 drafts, we will probably use some players or lose some players who are more useful to other organizations than they are to us. And we have lost one player before getting to our first pick. Chris Lance, you may remember him. He was on the Major League roster for good chunks of last season. He's actually somebody that we had taken off of the 40-man roster to save guaranteeing him a Major League contract. And interestingly, when we waived and DFA'd him a month or so ago, nobody picked him up. Actually, it was longer than a month ago at this point, probably a month and a half ago. So they could have had him for nothing, and instead they want him with all of the contingencies that go with being a Rule 5 pick, so not necessarily the best played by the Mariners there. Lance on paper is a pretty interesting power-hitting left-handed first baseman, durable, good influence in the clubhouse. Only hit .214 for us in 98 at-bats a year ago, and out of option years at this point, which made him much less interesting for us to keep on the 40-man roster, since it's pretty unlikely that he was going to make our 26-man roster this season. And a little bit surprised that Lance ended up being the only player who was taken from us. He was the first player picked in the entire Rule 5 draft and the only one picked by Seattle, although we had teams like Baltimore picking well into the 5th round. Although, interestingly, Baltimore picked in the 4th and 5th and 1st rounds, but they didn't actually pick in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, which is a very interesting strategy for the Rule 5 draft. But only one departure this year, so relatively low, and we're going to continue moving forward, heading towards the international free agent signing period, which is going to begin in about 3 weeks. And in addition to Gallick and Mancina being free agents off of our roster, several of our former important players happen to be free agents this year. Alejandro Landin, longtime infielder for us who had some monster years with us, signs with a division rival, going to be with the Angels next season after he spent this year with the Twins organization. Had a rough year offensively with just a 74 WRC plus. He'll be turning 33 next year. Still has a respectable bat and a more than respectable glove, but at about $5.7 million for a fragile player in his mid-30s, didn't think it made sense for us to reunite with Mr. Landin. And as expected, we've eventually lost our other big free agent from this offseason, Mike Gallick. We will be getting a supplemental first-round pick from him. or from his departure, more accurately. He ended up signing with the Mets. Not really huge money, quite honestly. Only 5 years and $72 million. That's a contract we would have probably happily given Gallick, but he was playing hard to get when we were having negotiations with both him and Doug Weiss about a month and a half ago. And since Doug Weiss was much more reasonable at the time, we decided to bring Mr. Weiss back. So Gallick ends up signing for less money than we had offered him and less money that we ended up giving to Weiss. So apparently he might have Scott Boras as his agent and perhaps overplayed his hand a bit. And another one of our former players is signed as well. Joe Lewin, the veteran pitcher, signed with Toronto for just $4.5 million a year. You may remember back when the offseason was getting underway and we were envisioning a scenario where both Weiss and Gallick may have joined Saldana in departing the team. Lewin was on the short list of guys that we thought might be a reasonable player to bring into the organization to help our pitching staff depth. But with the fact that we did bring Weiss back and we made that trade for Macho Rangel, no real need for us to engage with Lewin during this offseason. And we made it to the beginning of the international amateur free agent signing period. So before we finish off the episode, we'll politely ask for any ideas from the worldwide scouting department on which direction they think we should go with this class. 2 pitchers and 8 position players that we've been spending particular attention on and had in our camps most recently. One is the starting pitching prospect Wilson Salinas, only looking for $420,000. We think his stuff could be above average, movement and control in the average-ish range. He could have a devastating changeup if everything works out, but certainly a question whether he'll really have a major league ready repertoire of pitches without some fortunate success in the development lab. Does have good stamina, good at holding on runners. 16-year-old, throws around 90 miles an hour. Certainly will not be the focus of our class, but as a guy who's not looking for a ton of money, could be a nice supplemental player, given that we do have as much money to spend as anybody. Juan Miranda, a starting pitcher out of Cuba, is the prize among the pitchers. Potential 3 to 4 pitch arsenal if all goes well. Solid stamina, decent at holding on runners, extreme ground ball tendencies, and already throwing in the low to mid 90s. We think his stuff, movement, and control could all be above average to borderline exceptional if things go well. Recently turned 17 years old. Smart, not the greatest leader in the world, but Governor Miranda, who's looking for $3 million, is certainly the prize of the class of pitching prospects. And there ended up being 8 hitters that we were more focused on, or everyday players more accurately. And as a coincidence would have it, they're the 8 everyday players who all have 4-star or higher potential. Start at the bottom of the list with the left fielder Ernesto Robles. Looks like he could definitely hit some home runs. High work ethic and intelligence. Competent corner outfielder. Not the most exciting prospect in the world, looking for close to $3 million. Can't imagine he's going to be our main focus, but certainly the home run power is interesting. Shortstop Luis Mendoza, really good contact with plus home run power if he fully develops. Solid speed, looks competent-ish defensively. Hopefully he can get better than that. Interesting prospect out of the Dominican. And then the final 4-star ceiling prospect is the third baseman, David Alvarado. Really nice looking bat. Think that he can be above average in everything if he reaches his full potential. Also has durability in his favor. Not a ton of speed. Not the greatest defensively, but he does have a solid arm and a mixed personality with high work ethic and low adaptability. So Alvarado, Mendoza, and Robles, all solid candidates, all looking for $2.8 million. Slightly up the list, at least in terms of where our scout sees their ceilings, are another third baseman, Sergio Tin Can Sierra, potentially outstanding home run power and could be above average at everything else offensively. Glove, not all that exciting, but could definitely develop into a competent third baseman, not a ton of speed. Ezequiel Ochoa, a second baseman, also on the list. Very well balanced hitting personality. Certainly has some work to do as far as contact and avoiding strikeouts. Respectable defensively, below average in terms of his speed right now. 6'4" right-handed hitting middle infielder. And then a catcher is also listed as a 4.5-star ceiling prospect. Jorge Bootlegay. Don't know if I love that nickname for someone who's going to be handling the ball as frequently as a catcher would. Looks like he's competent defensively, some very positive personality traits, and then a very interesting potential bat for a backstop. Not a ton of speed, not that you're typically expecting a catcher to have a ton of speed. It's 6'5", looks like he could also play first base if you needed him to, but first base and catcher are his natural positions and probably the only ones he could play with any level of competence at the major league level. And range with those guys, with the catcher Legay looking for just $2.2 million, while the second baseman Ochoa looking for $3 million, and Sergio Sierra, the third baseman, right in the middle at $2.6 million. Two of the other highest end prospects are looking for $3 million each, and they're both center fielders. One, the Dutch center fielder Pim van der Velden, El Mulo, potentially outstanding home run power, off the charts, and we think his contact, gap power, and eye could all be above average as well. Like the high adaptability and work ethic, average-ish speed, and looks like a competent defensive outfielder. Hopefully could get a bit better. Looks like kind of a natural left fielder with that profile. The hope might be that we could improve him and turn him into an actual center fielder when all was said and done. And last, but hopefully not least, Alejandro Padilla, 16-year-old polar bear. Got some competition for Pete Alonso with Alejandro Padilla. Another guy who looks like a competent defensive outfielder right now. Pretty good speed, although his base running instincts are not that good right now. And a very well-balanced bat. Looks like he could do everything very well, and borderline excellent as far as his home run power and his eye. So some interesting prospects out there. I think, bat-wise, Padilla and Van der Velden probably stand out to me relative to some of the others that we looked at. Definitely also very intrigued by Juan Miranda, the young pitching prospect. Realistically, if we do shop at the top end of the market with the likes of Miranda looking for $3 million, or Padilla, Van der Velden, or one of the other players that we've talked about, most of whom are looking for close to $3 million. Probably only going to be signing one big ticket item and then looking to supplement the class with some less expensive players. So I'll certainly be spending more time on considering which direction I think is the right route to pursue offline. But if the members of the Worldwide Scouting Department have any thoughts on what they would do, as I mentioned, it's always very helpful for me to get your thoughts and feedback on how to build these IAFA classes. And with the IAFA class now up for negotiations, we will call it an episode. Not a ton of action, really more kind of getting through the Rule 5 draft, finding out exactly where some of our free agents ended up, and then getting prepared for the IAFA signing period. So we've done what we expected to do in this episode, and we'll turn things over to the Worldwide Scouting Department to share your thoughts on where perhaps we should go with this IAFA class. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.